a continuation of a radio series on mind control that we're bringing you. We heard for the last 5 weeks a lecture and interview by Dr. Colin Ross detailing the history of CIA's mind control experimental programs that have been documented by and documents obtained by the Freedom of Information Act. What we're going to hear today is the mind control testimony that was introduced into the Presidential Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments in March 15th of 1995. President Clinton has apologized and compensated some of the victims of the radiation experiments. At the end of the hearing, however, Valerie Wolf, Claudia Mullen, and Christy Nicola gave their testimony about mind control experiments and linked in with the radiation experiments. We're going to hear that testimony that was given to the advisory committee in the second half of the show. In the first half, we're going to hear Claudia Mullen talk about the experience of giving testimony at the presidential hearings. Claudia is a survivor of CIA mind control experimentation for many years and got introduced to this through the Tulane University, which we heard Colin Ross talk about Tulane's involvement in the mind control programs in the previous weeks here. It's extremely brave of these women to have come forward, and they really, in effect, had broke the silence for many survivors. You're listening to 88.1 CKLN.
But when she leaves the room, her life is never the same again, because she's been asked to give testimony in front of a presidential committee on radiation. And that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you all, was what the experience was like. And I have some clips from the testimony and to show you. And then I don't know if y'all got handouts, but they're not complete. But anyhow, what are we doing on time? Oh, okay. Well, anyhow, she walks in the room, and there's obviously a lot of important people there, but there's also just a lot of everyday people, people of all ages. The only people that are missing are children. There aren't any children there, but it's a good thing, because the stories that she hears, people that get up ahead of her tell their stories, they're pretty heart-wrenching, and she forgets to be nervous for a while because they just move her so much. But then finally she hears her name, and she realizes, oh, I have to give testimony. So she goes up and she gives her testimony, and they ask her questions, and when she leaves the room, all of a sudden everybody knows her name now, and people just start swarming all over her and telling her how brave she is, and she feels scared to death, and she can't figure out why everybody thinks that she's so brave. But she got up and told her story about the monster mom, and about the Magister, and about the camp, and about the cabins at Deep Creek Lodge place. Told them everything, and I forgot to tell you how she remembered. Because remember I said that that I always forgot everything. As soon as I got home, I would forget what had happened. And that went on. When I went away to college, I still had no memory of it, And then in October of '92, something happened to me completely unrelated. Had nothing to do with any of this. Just another crime that, in a city that has a lot of crime, actually. But a man comes into her home, a man that she knows, and he assaults her, he rapes her, and he keeps her for hours, and he beats her, and she thinks it's the worst thing that's ever happened to her, but somehow it's really familiar feeling. And after that day, all of a sudden she starts getting all these horrible nightmares and memories and flashbacks, and she didn't even know what a flashback was, but flashbacks start coming, and it pretty much triggered all the memories that started coming back. And so by the time she goes to Washington, she's only about halfway through doing the memories. So it's really kind of hard when she gets up to talk about it, because she has to control, not to go into a flashback when she's talking about it. But it works out okay. And after that, I have to say life was never the same again. From then on, there was no going back. Once I did it, I had to keep talking, because if you stop talking, that's when they get you. Because there are a lot of, to be honest, there's a lot of good things, and there's some bad parts about testifying. The good part is that she got to tell her story. People believed her. She was asked to tell her story, and because when the memories started coming back and she went into treatment, into therapy, the imaginary friends, they woke up after all these years. They woke up again, and they came out, and they would start writing furiously, pages, until it came, into a book about this big. And all of her memories, all the people, all the places that she went, what the people's titles were, who they worked for, how much money they got, anything that they talked about, whole conversations. And she sent out the information to various experts across the country who tried to verify as much as they could. And lo and behold, there was a lot of stuff in there that wasn't written down anywhere, that hadn't been released yet, but they think that is in the CIA files. But so it's good that she gets to get up and tell her story. And every time she tells her story, it's a little more healing. It's therapeutic. But it also gives other people a chance to tell their story, because it kind of starts something going. And ever since that day, people have started to talk about what happened. And she's met so many other children that are now grown up, and they're starting to remember. And she knows she's not alone anymore. Because all those years, even though she didn't remember a lot, she felt really alone. And she thought special meant alone or odd. And I guess you could say the bad part is that, like I said, once you testify, it becomes public record. And the good part is that you can't be sued, because no matter what as long as you're telling the truth, and that's what I did. You're making accusations against people, but they can't sue you because you're testifying, and it's the truth. And from then on, you can talk about the same people as much as you want, and they can't ever sue you. So that's one thing I never had to worry about, is being sued. But I've been threatened and harassed and assaulted since it happened, and I wouldn't be telling the truth if I said everything had been just great since then, because there have been some bad times. But had I to do it all over again, knowing what would have happened, I wouldn't change a thing. I'd still do it. I'd do it in a second. Only I would do it after I finished doing my memories, after I got all my memories back. That's the only thing that I would change. And let's see, is there anything else? Huh?
They wouldn't postpone the hearing, would they?
No. I tried to get them to, but they wouldn't. Oh yeah, and another reason that it would have been better if I had recalled all my memories before I testified, is because what I didn't realize was they used a lot of time distortion, along with the drugs and the electricity and the trauma. They used hypnosis, and they could distort time, and it also somehow it gets you to confuse people, because they thought, well, if there's a slight chance that she's going to remember, at least she'll get up things all confused. Plus, they throw in a few things like ceremonies and things like that, so you'll sound really crazy if you ever start to remember. And so my testimony would have been a little more accurate as far as, there's a few distortions in there, a few, like mixing people's names with the wrong face. But once I got all my memories, then I remembered, exactly. But I can't change testimony. Once it's given, it's given. So I thought maybe you all would like to see a little clip from it. I didn't bring my testimony because, as you can probably imagine, I don't like to see myself on film. I don't mind having my picture taken, but I really can't stand to watch myself on film, and I guess you know why. So I mainly just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like, and because hopefully in the near future there'll be a commission for victims of mind control. This was focused on radiation, and we were allowed to testify because, and there were 3 of us, well actually 4 of us, that were victims of mind control, but they used radiation. And I guess you could say, one of the lucky ones, because they didn't use a lot of radiation with me. And they took a lot of x-rays because I got hurt a lot, but with some mind control victims, they use a lot of radiation, and that's how we got to testify in front of a radiation commission. But hopefully, that's what we're trying to do. That's what the whole movement is about. But what we got started is we're trying to get a committee to investigate the files of the CIA that have to do with mind control. And so I showed a little bit of just what it was like, and then the questions that they ask you, because that's what you have to be prepared for. They only gave us like 2.5 weeks to prepare. And we had 2.5 weeks before we found out that we were going to go. And I went with my therapist and one other girl from New Orleans. And then another person came from New Mexico and testified. And then there were 6 other people, but they were testifying about strictly radiation. And we were able to submit as much material as we wanted ahead of time. But you could only talk for, they told you 5 minutes, but actually they gave us a little longer. But we were told that we had to put everything down and say it within 5 minutes, and then leave time for questions, because they did ask you questions. And the reason I left the questions in is because that was the tough part, the questions. I mean, it's not that they were hard to answer, it was just kind of being on the spot, and not knowing exactly what they were going to ask you. So this will give you a good idea of what kind of things they might ask, what it would be like. Let's see. And then in the handouts, I just wanted to mention, the reason I didn't read or tell you what was in my testimony is because I think it's in here. I put in a little bit about the advisory committee. Then that's the agenda for the day that we were testifying. And see, we're down number 8. And then a memorandum from the vice president about the research. Then my therapist, who talked before I did, and showed how there was a link between mind control and radiation, and how the memories had started to come back, and all the therapists that she had talked to across the country, their clients were saying the same thing. I mean, not exactly the same thing, but it was so similar that it was uncanny. And then this is my statement, and that's what But I actually submitted a lot more material than that. Names and places and dates, everything that I could remember. And then, what else is in here? This is, in October, they finally got the final report of the advisory committee. And this is what, there's 2 pages, and it was actually, nobody even called us and told us that they came out with any recommendations. But I saw it on the internet. Somebody sent it to me by email. And you got to remember that these committees last for like a year. They meet once a month in different parts of the country so that they can take, public speakers can come talk, and they reach every area of the country. But this had been going on. We were at the very end of it, and it had been going on since, I don't know, March or April of '94. And then, so this is what the recommendations were. And they did listen to us, like I said, because they recommended that all records of the CIA bearing on programs of secret human research, such as MKUltra, well, you can read it. And that's all the names of the projects that I could remember. They recommended that they be declassified. So, but of course that hasn't happened yet. And then there's some steps here to advocate for investigating and forming advocacy groups like, and I put in Lynn and Blanche's group that they started. And this is kind of, and they could correct me if I'm wrong, but this because of the, because we kind of put our foot in the door and testify, they started ACHS, the Advocacy Committee for Human Experimental Survivors. Okay, and also, if you all would like to read the testimony itself, and there's a book by John Rappaport called U.S. Government Mind Control Experiments on Children. They Want to Know by John Rappaport. And in the back of the room there's some flyers for how you can order the book. The documentation, which the man kept asking us about, there is documentation. For one thing, my memories were considered, documentation. All the people that I remembered, descriptions of places, people, project names, numbers, medical records, psychiatric records, or from my therapist, school records. We actually went back and verified that I did miss school at these times that I remembered. Actually, in grade school, I probably missed a third of every year, and yet I was never held back. I don't know why. When family records are considered documentation, you can go back and talk to relatives who remember that you were gone at this period of time. Also remember seeing you bruised or, being treated at Tulane. My sister remembers that. Pictures from childhood. My mother kept a scrapbook, and she usually had like 2 scrapbooks a year. And yet, except for 2 Christmases, there's no Christmas pictures with me in it. There's my sister, my mother, and my father, and I'm not in any of them because I wasn't there. And birthday. There's pictures of my sister's birthdays, and none for me. Notes, cards, or anything from the perpetrators, and I actually did. I got a Christmas card from Uncle Otto. Remember Uncle Otto from Deep Creek Lodge? I don't know if he really wrote it or not. They might have just done that to make me feel like, I don't know. Anyhow, I got a Christmas card from him, and the magistrate gave it to me and said Uncle Otto had sent it. He also gave me a doll, sent me a doll as a Christmas present, but they took it away from me. Any material like harassment material, which I got quite a bit of, and I probably will when I go home. I get it in the mail. I get it written on my house, so I have the police come every time that it's written on the house, my car, the fence. It's been written mostly in red paint, but sometimes blood, animal blood, So they're like threats, or it's just harassment, and things like die, shut up, or whatever. And so every time that happens, I have to have the police come out and take pictures, so it's documented that I'm getting it. And then I keep everything that I get in the mail. I have a caller ID and call tracer when I get phone calls. And sometimes I get phone calls and they'll say words that are supposed to trigger me and remind me of things that happened, or call me Crystal, which was my name at Tulane. And also you can order your phone records. Every month, along with my bill, I get every phone call that comes into my house is written down, where it's from. Military records, how the memories match the projects and the experiments, the similarity of stories between people. Also, it's a good idea, but don't ever do this alone, to go back to the sites if they're still there, and you'd be surprised, a lot of the buildings are still there. Of course, Tulane's still there, still going strong, but you go back there and take pictures of the places that you were in or went to, but you don't go alone. I went with my therapist because I was afraid of going into a flashback, but you can use that. And of course, the CIA files, if we can get them declassified. And the fact that the information you can have validated, that there's information that you know that isn't written in any book or published anywhere. And there's just one more thing that, I don't know how much time, but... yeah, I'm going to have questions, but I just wanted to say, everybody has to decide for themselves if they want to start talking, but I think you can see how it's important, and it helps the process, the healing process. It puts you in touch with people that you never thought you'd meet, that you get to know people that went through the same thing you did, and that's validation for yourself, because that's just as important as, you have to decide if the good outweighs the bad, and I did. And like I said, I'd do it again in a minute. Somebody once said, great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. Great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. Albert Einstein said that. I like that.
We've been listening to Claudia Mullen describe her giving testimony at the presidential hearings on radiation experiments in March 15th of 95. We are next going to hear that testimony, and you'll be hearing first Valerie Wolf, who is the therapist of Claudia and Chris. You'll be hearing Chris DiNicola, and then Claudia Mullen giving their testimony. You're listening to CKLN 88.1.
A panel of people who have asked to present. And again, please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing people's names correctly, but we have Ms. Chris DiNicola, Ms. Valerie Wolf, and Ms. Claudia Mullen. Are you all of New Orleans?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you for making the effort to come up to speak to us today.
Okay, I'm going to start. My name is Valerie Wolf. In listening to the testimony today, it all sounds really familiar. I am here to talk about a possible link between radiation and mind control experimentation that began in the late 1940s. The main reason that mind control research is being mentioned is because people are alleging that they were exposed as children to mind control, radiation, drugs, and chemical experimentation, which were administered by the same doctors who are known to have been involved in conducting both radiation and mind control research. Written documentation has been provided revealing the names of people and the names of research projects in statements from people across the country. It is also important to understand that mind control techniques and follow-ups into adulthood may have been used to intimidate these particular research subjects into not talking about their victimization in government research. As a therapist for the past 22 years, I have specialized in treating victims and perpetrators of trauma and their families. When word got out that I was appearing at this hearing, nearly 40 therapists across the country, and I had about a week and a half to prepare, contacted me to talk about clients who had reported being subjects in radiation and mind control experiments. The consistency of people's stories about the purpose of the mind control and pain induction techniques such as electric shock, use of hallucinogens, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, dislocation of limbs, and sexual abuse is remarkable. There is almost nothing published on this aspect of mind control used with children, and these clients come from all over the country having had no contact with each other. What was startling was that therapists reported many of these clients were also physically ill with autoimmune problems, thyroid problems, multiple sclerosis, and other muscle and connective tissue diseases, as well as mysterious ailments for which a diagnosis cannot be found. While somatization disorder is commonly found in these clients, many of the clients who've been involved in the human experimentation with the government have multiple medically documented physical ailments. And I was really shocked today to hear one of the speakers talk about the cysts and the teeth breaking off, because I have a client that that's happening to. Many people are afraid to tell their doctors their histories as mind control subjects for fear of being considered to be crazy. These clients have named some of the same people, particularly a Dr. Green, who was associated with clients' reports of childhood induction of pain, mind control techniques, and childhood sexual abuse. One of my clients who had seen him with a name tag identified him as Dr. L. Wilson Green. A person with this same name was the scientific director of the chemical and radiological laboratories at the Army Chemical Center, and that he was engaged in doing research for the Army and other intelligence agencies. Other names that have come to light are Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and Dr. Martin Orn, who it is reported were also involved in radiation research. It needs to be made clear that people have remembered these names and events spontaneously, with free recall, and without the use of any memory retrieval techniques such as hypnosis. As much as possible, we have tried to verify the memories with family members, records, and experts in the field. Many attempts have been made through Freedom of Information Act filings to gain access to the mind control research documentation. These requests have generally been slowed down or denied, although some information has been obtained, which suggests that at least some of the information supplied by these clients is true. It is important that we obtain all of the information contained in the CIA and military files to verify or deny our clients' memories. Although many of the files for MK Ultra may have been destroyed, whatever is left, along with the files for other projects, such as Bluebird and Artichoke, to name only two, contain valuable information. Furthermore, if, as the evidence suggests, some of these people were used in radiation experiments, there might be information in the mind control experiment files on radiation experiments. We need this information to help in the rehabilitation and treatment of many people who have severe psychological and medical problems which interfere with their social, emotional, and financial well-being. Finally, I urge you to recommend an investigation into these matters. Although there was a commission on mind control, it did not include experiments on children because most of them were too young or still involved in the research in the late 1970s to come forward. The only way to end the harassment and suffering of these people is to make public what has happened to them in the mind control experiments. Please recommend that there be an investigation and that the files be opened on the mind control experiments as they related to children. Thank you.
I'm Chris DiNicola, born July of 1962, rendering me 32 years of age. I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. My parents were divorced around 1966, and Donald Richard Ebner, my natural father, was involved with Dr. Green in the experiments. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. Dr. Green performed radiation experiments on me in 1970, focusing on my neck, throat, and chest, 1972 focusing on my chest and my uterus in 1975. Each time I became dizzy, nauseous, and threw up. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin. The first significant memory took place at Kansas City University in 1966. Don Ebner took me there by plane when my mom was out of town. I was in what looked like a laboratory, and there seemed to be other children. I was strapped down, naked, spread eagle, on a table, on my back. Dr. Green had electrodes on my body, including my head. He used what looked like an overhead projector and repeatedly said he was burning different images into my brain while a red light flashed aimed at my forehead. In between each sequence, he used electric shock on my body and told me to go deeper and deeper, while repeating each image would go deeper into my brain, and I would do whatever he told me to do. I felt drugged because he had given me a shot before he started the procedure. When it was over, he gave me another shot. The next thing I remember, I was with my grandparents again in Tucson, Arizona. I was 4 years old. You can see from this experiment that Dr. Green used trauma, drugs, post-hypnotic suggestion, and more trauma in an effort to gain total control of my mind. He used me in radiation experiments both for the purposes of determining the effects of radiation on various parts of my body and to terrorize me as an additional trauma in the mind control experiments. The rest of the experiments took place in Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert. I was taught how to pick locks, be secretive, use my photographic memory, and a technique to withhold information by repeating numbers to myself. Dr. Green moved on to wanting me to kill dolls that looked like real children. I stabbed a doll with a spear once after being severely traumatized, but the next time I refused. He used many pain induction techniques, but as I got older, I resisted more and more. He often tied me down in a cage, which was near his office. Between 1972 and 1976, he and his assistants were sometimes careless and left the cage unlocked. Whenever physically possible, I snuck into his office and found files with reports and memos addressed to CIA and military personnel. Included in these files were project, subproject, subject, and experiment names with some code numbers for radiation and mind control experiments, which I have submitted in your written documentation. I was caught twice, and Dr. Green ruthlessly used electric shock, drugs, spun me on a table, put shots in my stomach and my back, dislocated my joints, and hypnotic techniques to make me feel crazy and suicidal. Because of my rebellion and growing lack of cooperation, they gave up on me as a spy assassin. Consequently, the last 2 years, 1974 to 1976, Dr. Green used various mind control techniques to reverse the spy assassin messages to self-destruct and death messages. His purpose? He wanted me dead, and I struggled to stay alive all of my adult life. I believe it is by the grace of God that I am still alive. These horrible experiments have profoundly affected my life. I developed multiple personality disorder because Dr. Green's goal was to split my mind into as many parts as possible so he could control me totally. He failed. but I've had to endure years of constant physical, mental, and emotional pain, even to this day. I've been in therapy consistently for 12 years, and it wasn't until I found my current therapist 2.5 years ago, who had knowledge of the mind control experiments, that I've finally been able to make real progress and begin to heal. In closing, I ask that you keep in mind that the memories I've described are but a glimpse of the countless others that took place over the 10 years between 1966 and 1976. That they weren't just radiation, but mind control and drug experiments as well. I have included more detailed information of what I remember in your written documentation. Please help us by recommending an investigation and making the information available so that therapists and other mental health professionals can help more people like myself. Please help us in an effort to prevent these heinous acts from continuing in the future. Thank you very much.
Between the years of 1957 and 1984, I became a pawn in a government scheme whose ultimate goal was mind control and to create the perfect spy, all through the use of chemicals, radiation, drugs, hypnosis, electric shock, isolation in tubs of water, sleep deprivation, brainwashing, verbal, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. I was exploited unwittingly for nearly 3 decades of my life, and the only explanations given to me were that, quote, the end justifies the means, and, quote, I was serving my country in their bold effort to fight communism. I can only summarize my circumstances by saying they took an already abused 7-year-old child and compounded my suffering beyond belief. The saddest part is, I know for a fact that I was not alone. There were countless other children in my same situation, and there was no one to help us. Until now. I've already submitted as much information as possible, including conversations overheard of the people, agencies responsible. I'm able to report all this to you in such detail because of my photographic memory and the arrogance of the doctors, the arrogance of the people involved. They were certain they would always control my mind. Although the process of recalling these atrocities is not an easy one, nor is it without some danger to myself and my family, I feel the risk is worth taking. Dr. L. Wilson Green, who claimed to have received $50 million from the Edgewood Chemical and Radiology Laboratory as part of the TSD, or Technical Science Division of the CIA, once described to Dr. Charles Brown that, quote, children were used as subjects because they were more fun to work with and cheaper, too. They needed lower profile subjects than soldiers or government people. So only young, willing females would do. Besides, he said, I like scaring them. They in the agency think I'm a god, creating subjects experiments for whatever deviant purposes Sid and James can think up. Sid being Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, James, Dr. James Hamilton. In 1958, I was to be tested, they told me, by some important doctors from the society, or the Human Ecology Society. And I was instructed to cooperate. I was told not to look at anyone's faces and not try hard not to ignore any names, as this was a very secret project. But I was told to be brave, and all these things would help me forget. Naturally, as most children do, I did the opposite and remembered as much as I could. Dr. John Gittinger tested me, Dr. Cameron gave me the shocks, and Dr. Green the x-rays. Then I was told by Sid Gottlieb that, quote, I was ripe for the big A, or meaning artichoke. By the time I left to go home, just like every time from then on, I would remember only whatever explanations Dr. Robert G. Heath of Tulane Medical University gave me for the odd bruises, needle marks, burns on my head, fingers, and even the genital soreness. I had no reason to believe otherwise. They had already begun to control my mind. The next year, I was sent to a lodge in Maryland called Deep Creek Cabins to learn how to sexually please men. I was taught how to coerce them into talking about themselves, and it was Richard Helms, who was deputy director of the CIA, Dr. Gottlieb, Captain George White, Morris Allen, who all planned on filming as many high government agency officials and heads of academic institutions and foundations as possible, so that later when the funding for mind control and radiation started to dwindle, projects would continue. I was used to entrap many unwitting men, including themselves, all with the use of a hidden camera. I was only 9 years old when this sexual humiliation began. I overheard conversations about a part of the agency called ORD, which I found out was Office of Research and Development. It was run by Dr. Green, Dr. Stephen Aldrich, Martin Orn, and Morris Allen. Once a crude remark was made by Dr. Gottlieb about a certain possible leak over New Orleans East involving a large group of retarded children who are being given massive doses of radiation. He asked, why was Wilson so worried about a few retarded kids? After all, they would be the least likely to spill the beans. Another time, I heard Dr. Martin Orn, who was the director then of the scientific office and later the head of the Institute for Experimental Research, state that, quote, in order to keep more funding coming from different sources for radiation and mind control projects, he suggested stepping up the amounts of stressors used and also the blackmail portion of the experiments. He said it needed to be done faster than to get rid of the subjects, or they were asking for us to come back later and haunt them with our remembrances. There's much more I could tell you about government-sponsored research, including project names, sub-project numbers, people involved, facilities used, tests, and other forms of pain induction. But I think I've given more than enough information to recommend further investigation of all the mind control projects, especially as they involve so much use of the radiation. I would love nothing more than to say that I dreamed all this up and need just to forget it. But that would be a tragic mistake. It would also be a lie. All these atrocities did occur to me and to countless other children, and all under the guise of defending our country. It is because of the cumulative effects of exposure to radiation, chemicals, drugs, pain, and subsequent mental and physical distress that I've been robbed of the ability to work and even to bear any children of my own. It is blatantly obvious that none of this was needed, nor should it ever have been allowed to take place at all. And the only means we have to seek out the awful truth and bring it to light is by opening whatever files remain on all the projects and through another presidential commission on mind control. I believe that every citizen of this nation has the right to know just what is fact and what is fiction. It is our greatest protection against the possibility of this ever happening again. In conclusion, I can offer you no more than what I've given you today, the truth. And I thank you for your time.
Are there comments or questions from the committee? Duncan?
Could I ask either of you, where were your parents through all this? Do you have any idea how you were recruited in the first place? Do you have parents, and did your parents know anything about what was going on?
I can make a brief statement on that. It was my father who was involved with Dr. Green. My mother was not aware because they were divorced when I was 4 years old. Well, maybe before that, separated. And what would happen, how he gained access to me is these experiments took place actually in the middle of the night. And he would sneak in while my mom was asleep, take me out, and she had absolutely no knowledge of what happened. However, when these memories did surface and I began to tell her about them, there was no question in her mind that he was capable. He had been in the military, in the Air Force. He had access to meet Dr. Green. So, in answer to your question, it was my father. He groomed me from the very beginning, started sexually abusing me from the very beginning, and it was just something that he wanted to do. And he was closely involved with Dr. Green, but my mom had no knowledge. The only thing she knew was that she wanted to get away from him. She didn't know why. She just knew she had to get away from him. because of my reaction to him. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on. Thank you. Thank you.
You want an answer from me also?
That's up to you.
If you want.
The way I got involved was I was adopted when I was 2.5 by a woman who sexually abused me. And then she was a friend of the chairman of the board of Tulane University at the time. And as a favor to him, I began to show symptoms of, typical of childhood abuse when I was very, very young. And she asked him to recommend a psychiatrist. And he recommended Dr. Heath, who was involved with the project already. And so when he discovered that I had already been abused from the time I was practically born, and that I had the ability to dissociate, and that I had almost perfect recall, and I passed all the personality tests that they gave me, he suggested me for the project. And so that's how I got into it. My father had no idea, and he died when I was very young. But I don't know if my mother knew or not. I don't think she really cared, to tell you the truth. And then she died when I was a teenager. So after that, they had access to me from then on.
Lois?
You mentioned that there are others across the country who are recalling similar things.
Yes.
Do they all cover the same time span generally, or do you have a feel for that?
Yeah, generally they're covering the same time span from about the late 1940s until, one of the things that we're hearing about is people that were assigned to monitor them in case they should start to remember, because it's so horrible what was done. So we're not exactly sure when the actual experimentation took place and when it got into just the monitoring to make sure that they were still under control, and not everybody is being monitored. So, but yeah, pretty much I think it's from the late 40s through the 1970s, and maybe even into 1984.
Later than that, I found out. Because after my parents died, and there was no one to protect me, the monitor that she spoke of, that my particular monitor was a physician at Tulane University, and so he was a family friend also of my mother's, and he just kept on making sure that I kept going back and forgetting it.
So it's kind of unclear as to whether it stopped or whether it where the
They still monitor you, though. That's why I am taking some danger coming here today, because I'm still being watched.
I know this sounds unbelievable, but I mean, there's actual, she gets stuff in the mail, she gets phone calls, people have been writing things on her house using the pseudonym that they used when she was at Tulane, and only they would know that name. My real name was never used, ever, in anything. So.
Were they all children at the time?
Yes.
When they were
all children. And the thing is as therapists, we are trying really hard to figure this out and to get as much information as we can. Claudia's memories have been verified, a lot of them, because the way I've approached this is I don't read in the field. And so as people give me information, I send them to experts like Alan Shefflin, who has a lot of information, and then he'll get back to me to confirm or deny. He has never denied any information that I've sent him. Some of it can't be because we don't have all the information, but a lot of Claudia's memories have been validated, and they're not in any published source. The only way she would know the things she knows is if she filed Freedom of Information Act information. And this is what Alan Shefflin is telling me. So I've been very careful not to know a whole lot. So if someone tells me something, I don't even cue them that, because I don't know either.
Okay.
It seems to me that documentary evidence is going to be key to establishing the truth of these claims.
Yes, absolutely.
It's hard for me to imagine that a program as large and as complex as you people have described could have gone on for so long without a great deal of documentation. The question is, where is this documentation now? It becomes a catch-22 if it is said that all of the documentation resides within the CIA files and all of it's secret and they won't give it to us. But what you've described is a pattern of a very complex organization which involves plenty of people outside of the CIA as well. Therefore, there must be a substantial amount of documentation which could be discovered. You just mentioned the letters that some of you are still receiving. There is a lead to documentation. Can you describe for me what efforts have been made either by yourselves or by other people who are working on the story to try to track down some of this documentation? And what you meant a moment ago when you said that some of these memories have been verified or validated.
Okay. Dr. Alan Shefflin, and you have his resume in the documentation and a statement from him about Claudia in your documentation. He has been for the past 20 years filing Freedom of Information Act filings to get this information, has been piecing it together. Other people across the country have been doing the same, going back to the government files, getting what they can. And what they've also been doing is writing books, sharing information. So he has actual Freedom of Information Act information. The problem is that it's when the requests are going in now, they're being slowed down or denied or just kind of lost in the shuffle, and the information is very difficult to get.
I'm sorry, I don't see the documentation in the package that was provided to me. Is there something missing?
I supplied project numbers.
I sent a packet of documentation, overnight mail. It should have been here Monday and some more yesterday. So it maybe isn't.
Well, if we haven't received it, we'll let you know.
Okay, I sent the first one to Steve Clademan and the second one to Kristen Crotty.
We have it.
You have it?
Yeah, we have some of these.
Okay, and again, it was, what I could pull together in about a week and a half from across the country, but the consistency of the stories. And the thing is, we want to verify. So Alan has amassed over 20 years from Freedom of Information Act, from memos other people give him, or sharing information, a lot of information. But we don't have the complete story. There's still a lot of stuff that we don't know. And that's what we're trying to find out, because
does any of this documentation specifically refer to radiation experiments? Because we are told by CIA that they never did any radiation experiments.
The ORD?
So what we need is documentation in order to pursue that.
All you have to do is look up anything on ORD, the one that I mentioned that I overheard them speaking about. That was almost strictly radiation. And that was run by Dr. Stephen Aldridge, Martin Orn.
And that's included in the package which you sent Steve Kleitman?
Yes. I gave you project numbers, project names, sub-project numbers, even the subjects. We were given numbers ourselves for each specific experiment. And I overheard my number because they would assume that they would use techniques so that you would forget. Assume, when you go home, you wouldn't remember what happened. So they just talked freely in front of me. That's why no one ever hid their face, wore a mask or anything, because they knew that I would not remember. And I didn't. I didn't remember until 2 years ago.
And also, I think you could follow up on Dr. L. Wilson Green. I don't know if you've come across him, but he seems to have been involved in both. And I think, realistically, in terms of the mind control, some of the subjects were used in mind control and radiation. Some, as you've been hearing, have been strictly radiation, and some were strictly mind control. I think the reason it's coming up now is because in some of the stuff people are remembering, they knew that it would break down. They really worked hard to induce amnesia, and they knew it would break down. And I think in the last couple of years that's what's been happening, because we're hearing more and more, and so we're just trying to find out what's happening here. So we'd appreciate any help you could give us on that.
Did you want to make?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to address you for a moment. The question you asked about the documentation on radiation specifically, included in my packet, and I don't know if you have that or not. It's entitled Radiation File Information. There are names of subject names, experiment names, and some code numbers that I remember. And the problem is we have no way of verifying this without opening the files. I mean, I
So you
believe,
have those?
yeah.
You have what she remembers, and you have what Claudia remembers.
Do you have the documentation?
All I have from you is your three-page
Well,
three-page
there's a
document.
whole packet of information.
We can clarify that. That's
I gather the staff has it, so we can
Yeah,
look into it
okay, good.
We
afterwards.
can clarify what we don't have, what you do have, and whatever it is we can put together. And we thank you very much
Okay, thank you.
for your traveling from New Orleans to present to us.
We've just heard the historic testimony of mind control experimentation introduced to the presidential hearings on radiation experiments. This testimony took place on March 15th of 1995. Currently, the survivor movement is calling for similar hearings on the mind control experiments in particular. You've been listening to the International Connection here on CKLN. We're going to feature more information with Valerie Wolf and Claudia Mullen in upcoming shows. If anybody's interested in getting transcripts of this show, of the whole series, coming up next week, we're going to continue with this series, and we'll be featuring an interview with Ronald Howard Cohen, a writer and survivor of abduction and severe drugging in the late 60s. And he has experienced further harassment in attempting to publish a book about his experiences. And we'll be continuing this series until October of 1997, and there's lots more information that's going to come out. 88.1 CKLN.
Point out that with us are many family members of citizens who were subject to human radiation experiment, and some of the advocates who represent them. Their presence signifies that this administration's commitment to meeting our obligations of power, our willingness to share information, to respect the right of people to know the facts, the responsibility to limit secrecy, and that which is truly essential, and that is to make those who were wronged and harmed whole. When President Clinton came to Washington, he was dedicated to the task of rebuilding the relationship of trust between the citizens and its government. This advisory committee report, the President's response, and the actions he will direct many of us to take today are all evidence of our commitment and his commitment to rebuild the trust with the American people. Why did we do this? Why did the President direct his administration to open the doors on human radiation experiments? I believe that this openness puts us in a position as a nation to close many chapters of the Cold War, just as the President did by ending nuclear weapons testing for the United States, as the United States and Russia did in pointing our missiles away from each other, and in dismantling warheads and extending the NPT. And today, another step of that openness is coming clean on the human radiation experience. When the President appointed the advisory committee, he committed our whole government to a massive record search, which included some 840,000 pages and the declassification of some 3,020 documents. And we have made available to the American people these government records because they strike at the heart of the relationship between the American people and their government, and whether the government misused individual citizens. The President committed to do this without knowing where it would lead or whether the records would reveal government mistakes, cause embarrassments, or lawsuits. He did this because he believed that it was the right thing to do. Today, the President receives from Dr. Faden and her colleagues on the President's Advisory Committee a report that tells the story of radiation experiments involving human subjects funded by the government. We did not realize when we began this journey the difficulty of the charge given these citizens. Eminent ethicists, physicians, scientists, citizens, even lawyers. For the past 18 months, the advisory committee members and their staff have devoted much of their lives to this investigation. They sacrificed their weekends, their vacations, and late hours. And in the end, for the committee, their actual working days to review the documents going back for decades. Today, they give us their best judgment as to whether persons were wronged. The nation owes to them, to their families, and to all the staffs that have worked on this issue, the generous gratitude for their public service, and most importantly, for the recommendations which the President will receive shortly. And most of all, we owe a gracious thanks to the family members who are here. Dr. Faden.
Mr. President, Secretary O'Leary, Attorney General Reno, Secretary Shalala, other members of the Human Radiation Interagency Working Group, on behalf of my 13 colleagues on the Advisory Committee, I am proud to submit our final report. We worked extremely hard over the last 18 months in order to inform you and the American people about what really happened to radiation research subjects in the Cold War period. With the assistance of federal agencies, private research centers and hospitals, and numerous citizens, we have assembled and reviewed hundreds of thousands of documents, many of which were previously secret, in 31 days of open hearings conducted in Washington and throughout the country. We have heard from hundreds of public witnesses. We have found that wrongs were indeed committed, both with experiments involving radiation and with intentional releases of radiation into the environment. In the pursuit of peace and the advancement of medicine, certainly two laudable goals, the rights and interests of individuals and communities were sometimes ignored. We found that government officials and physicians who had the trust of the public and of their patients abused that trust. Patients were used as subjects of experiments without their knowledge or consent. Information was withheld from affected communities and from the public. Secrets were kept to protect the government from embarrassment and legal liability. While the radiation doses in the experiments we studied were usually low, and officials and scientists were often concerned about risk, we do not believe that excuses the wrongs that were done. We urge you to do the right thing by those who have been wronged or harmed by these events. In our report, we recommend for your consideration guidelines for compensating former subjects. But if we are to keep faith with those who have suffered, we must all do more. Your extraordinary efforts have allowed the American people to learn about a piece of our history that we could not otherwise have understood. You have opened the doors of this nation's records, and they must stay open. You have recognized the price of secrecy in research for what it is, a legacy of cynicism and a legacy of distrust. If we are to keep faith with those who have suffered, we must do everything possible to guarantee that what happened to them never happens again. The committee learned that research safeguards have come a long way since the Second World War. Americans can and should feel much more secure about medical research today, but the system remains imperfect. I urge you to carefully review the committee's findings and recommendations. Both the government and research institutions must do all they can to protect our fellow citizens. If this committee's work is to mean anything, it has to be that 50 years from now, there does not have to be another presidential committee charged with investigating allegations of abuses of human subjects. There should never be another such advisory committee. Information must not be concealed again from people in their own time, so that it takes 2 generations for the truth to come out. Mr. President, your leadership in this area has been indispensable. Without your willingness to open government files to our scrutiny, our work would have been totally impossible. We could not have done it. Your staff, your cabinet and agency heads and their staffs have been supportive at every turn. We have had every request met, but always with great respect for our independence. You've set a new standard for open government in an area that has been largely secret for 50 years. We on the committee are both honored and grateful that you have taken our work so seriously. I hope that we have met the challenge that you put before us 18 months ago. On behalf of the committee and of our staff, thank you for this extraordinary opportunity to serve our nation. It has been a true privilege.
Will the other committee members please stand? Let's give them all a hand. They did an extraordinary job. Let me begin with a simple thank you to everyone who participated in this extraordinary project and to everyone who supported them. I am especially glad to see here today Senator Glenn, who's been so active in working on the medical ethics issue, Congressman Markey, who's worked on this issue for a very long time, Congressman Frost, Secretary Shalala, Deputy Secretary of Veterans Affairs Herschel Gober, and of course the Attorney General, basically tries to get us all to do the right thing all the time. I want to thank Secretary O'Leary for her extraordinary devotion to this cause, and you heard in her remarks basically the way that she views this. It's a part of her ongoing commitment to finish the end of the Cold War. And perhaps no energy secretary has ever done as much as she has to be an advocate, whether it is for continued reforms within the Energy Department or her outspoken endorsement of the strongest possible commitment on the part of the United States to a comprehensive test ban treaty, which I believe we will achieve next year, in no small measure thanks to the support of the Secretary of Energy. And of course, I want to thank Dr. Ruth Faden for her extraordinary commitment of about a year and a half of her life to this unusual but important task. And all of you who served on the committee, I remember the first time we put this committee together, I looked, I said, that's a pretty distinguished outfit. I wish I could give them 5 or 6 jobs to do. I'll expect you back next Monday, and then we'll. I do thank you so much for the work you have done. Let me tell you that just as this is an important part of the efforts that Secretary O'Leary outlined, I saw this committee as an indispensable part of our effort to restore the confidence of the American people in the integrity of their government. All of these political reform issues, to me, are integrated. When I became the president, I realized we had great new economic challenges, we had profound social problems, that a lot of these things had to be done by an energized American citizenry, but that our national government had a role to play in moving our country through this period of transition. And in order to do it, we needed to increase the capacity of the government to do it through political reform, but we also needed, as much as anything else, to increase the confidence of the American people, that at the very least they could trust the United States government to tell the truth and to do the right things. So you have to understand that for me, one reason this is so important is that I see it as part of our ongoing effort to give this government back to the American people. Senator Glenn's long effort to get Congress to apply to itself the same laws it imposes on the private sector. The restrictions that I imposed on members of my administration in high positions for lobbying for foreign governments. And when the lobby bill failed in the Congress, I just imposed it by executive order on members of the executive branch. All these efforts at political reform, it seems to me, are important. But none of these efforts can succeed unless people believe that they can rely on their government to tell them the truth and to do the right thing. We have declassified thousands of government documents, files from the Second World War, the Cold War, President Kennedy's assassination. These actions are not only consistent with our national security, they are essential to advance our values. So, to me, that's what this is all about. And to all those who represent the families who have been involved in these incidents, let me say to you, I hope you feel that your government has kept its commitment to the American people to tell the truth and to do the right thing. We discovered soon after I entered office that with the specter of an atomic war looming like Armageddon, far nearer than it does today, the United States government actually did carry out on our citizens experiments involving radiation. That's when I ordered the creation of this committee. Dr. Faden and the others did a superb job. They enlisted many of our nation's most significant and important medical and scientific ethicists. They had to determine first whether experiments conducted or sponsored by our government between 1944 and 1974 met the ethical and scientific standards of that time and of our time. And then they had to see to it that our research today lives up to nothing less than our highest values and our most deeply held beliefs. From the beginning, it was obvious to me that this energetic committee was prepared to do its part. We declassified thousands of pages of documents. We gave committee members the keys to the government's doors, file cabinets, and safes. For the last year and a half, the only thing that stood between them and the truth were all the late nights and hard work they had to put in. This report I received today is a monumental document in more ways than one. But it is a very, very important piece of America's history, and it will shape America's future in ways that will make us a more honorable, more successful, and more ethical country. What this committee learned, I would like to review today with a little more detail than Dr. Faden said, because I think it must be engraved on our national memory. Thousands of government-sponsored experiments did take place at hospitals, universities, and military bases around our nation. The goal was to understand the effects of radiation exposure on the human body. While most of the tests were ethical by any standards, some were unethical, not only by today's standards, but by the standards of the time in which they were conducted. They failed both the test of our national values and the test of humanity. In one scientist injected plutonium into 18 patients without their knowledge. In another, doctors exposed indigent cancer patients to excessive doses of radiation, a treatment from which it is virtually impossible that they could ever benefit. The report also demonstrates that these and other experiments were carried out on precisely those citizens who count most on the government for its help, the destitute and the gravely ill. But the dispossessed were not alone. Members of the military, precisely those on whom we and our government count most, they were also test subjects. Informed consent means your doctor tells you the risk of the treatment you are about to undergo. In too many cases, informed consent was withheld. Americans were kept in the dark about the effects of what was being done to them. The deception extended beyond the test subjects themselves to encompass their families and the American people as a whole. For these experiments were kept secret, and they were shrouded not for a compelling reason of national security, but for the simple fear of embarrassment, and that was wrong. Those who led the government when these decisions were made are no longer here to take responsibility for what they did. They're not here to apologize to the survivors, the family members of the communities whose lives were darkened by the shadow of the atom and these choices. So today, on behalf of another generation of American leaders and another generation of American citizens, the United States of America offers a sincere apology to those of our citizens who were subjected to these experiments, to their families, and to their communities. When the government does wrong, we have a moral responsibility to admit it. The duty we owe to one another to tell the truth and to protect our fellow citizens from excesses like these is one we can never walk away from. Our government failed in that duty, and it offers an apology to the survivors and their families, and to all the American people who must be able to rely upon the United States to keep its word, to tell the truth, and to do the right thing. We know there are moments when words alone are not enough. That's why I'm instructing my cabinet to use and build on these recommendations, to devise promptly a system of relief, including compensation that meets the standards of justice and conscience. When called for, we will work with Congress to serve the best needs of those who were harmed. Make no mistake, as the committee report says, there are circumstances where compensation is appropriate as a matter of ethics and principle. I am committed to seeing to it that the United States of America lives up to its responsibility. Our greatness is measured not only in how we so frequently do right, but also how we act when we know we've done the wrong thing, how we confront our mistakes, make our apologies, and take action. That's why this morning I signed an executive order instructing every arm and agency of our government that conducts, supports, or regulates research involving human beings to review immediately their procedures in light of the recommendations of this report and the best knowledge and standards available today, and to report back to me by Christmas. I've also created a Bioethics Advisory Commission to supervise the process, to watch over all such research, and to see to it that never again do we stray from the basic values of protecting our people and being straight with them. The report I received today will not be left on a shelf to gather dust. Every one of its pages offers a lesson, and every lesson will be learned from these good people who put 1.5 years of their lives into the effort to set America straight. Medical and scientific progress depends upon learning about people's responses to new medicines, to new cutting-edge treatments. Without this kind of research, our children would still be dying from polio and other killers. Without responsible radiation research, we wouldn't be making the progress we are in the war on cancer. We have to continue to research, but there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. There are local citizens review boards. There are regulations that establish proper informed consent and ensure that experiments are conducted ethically. But in overseeing this necessary research, we must never relax our vigilance. The breathtaking advances in science and technology demand that we always keep our ethical watchlight burning. No matter how rapid the pace of change, it can never outrun our core convictions that have stood us so well as a nation for more than 200 years now, through many different scientific revolutions. I believe we will meet the test of our times, that as science and technology evolve, our ethical conscience will grow, not shrink. Informed consent, community right to know, our entire battery of essential human protections, all these grew up in response to the health and humanitarian crises of this 20th century. They are proof that we are equal to our challenges. Science is not ever simply objective. It emerges from the crucible of historical circumstances and personal experience. Times of crisis and fear can call forth bad science, even science we know in retrospect to be unethical. Let us remember the difficult years chronicled in this report and think about how good people could have done things that we know were wrong. Let these pages serve as an internal reminder to hold humility and moral accountability in higher esteem than we do the latest development in technology. Let us remember, too, that cynicism about government has roots in historical circumstances. Because of stonewallings and evasions in the past, times when a family member or a neighbor suffered an injustice and had nowhere to turn and couldn't even get the facts, some Americans lost faith in the promise of our democracy. Government was very powerful, but very far away and not trusted to be ethical. So today, by making ourselves accountable for the sins of the past, I hope more than anything else, we are laying the foundation stone for a new era. Good people like these members of Congress who have labored on this issue for a long time and have devoted their careers to trying to do the right thing and having people justifiably feel confidence in the work of their representatives. They will continue to work to see that we implement these recommendations. And under our watch, we will no longer hide the truth from our citizens. We will act as if all that we do will see the light of day. Nothing that happens in Washington will ever be more important in anyone's life affected by these experiments, perhaps, than these reports we issue today. But all of us as Americans will be better off because of the larger lesson we learned in this exercise and because of our continuing effort to demonstrate to our people that we can be faithful to their values. Thank you very much.